One of the things that you're going to have to decide as a defensive coordinator or a head coach is, do you want your defensive line to flip based on the strength of the offense? There's a lot of good reasons to flip. There's reasons not to flip. What we're going to look at today are the two primary reasons that we want to flip, particularly our interior defensive tackles in our 40 front defense. Now, this is going to remain true for a 4-2-5 or a 4-4, as well as for a 4-3 defense or anything where you're playing a 3 technique to the strength and a 2-eye or a 1 technique, a shade to the weak side. Balanced twos, it's not necessarily different. We'll talk a little bit about the defensive ends. The defensive ends are not as important in flipping in your 4-3 defense. I'll talk about the reasons we do flip them in the 40 front 4-2-5. Let's go ahead and go over the board and take a look at that 40 front defense. Okay, here we're looking at our base 4-2-5 defensive front, where we have our 3 technique to the strong side. We'll talk about why we make those strength calls. And we've got a weak shade. You could play a 2-eye. We do that in our G call. It doesn't really matter for our purposes right now. We play a 5 technique defensive end, outside shade of the tackle. This H-back wing might change that, but it's not really important for the video, again, at the moment. And then we play either a 7 inside shade of the tight end or a head up 6 technique, depending on the talent of the player that is there. Now that we know we've got our 3 technique as our strong tackle, he's really the focal point of the 2 main reasons that we're going to be flipping this defensive line. We're going to go through a checklist of rules for making our strength call. The first thing we look for is there a tight end? If there's a tight end, then our strength is going to be to the tight end. So in this case, against this front, our strength is going to be to the right because they have a tight end to our right. If there were no tight ends or 2 tight ends, we would next look for most receivers. So we'd be looking, for example, a trips formation. We would call the strength to the most receivers to that side, or 20 personnel. We'd be looking for where the slot was lined up and call the strength that way. If we have a balanced formation, the strength will be called to the wide side. If it's balanced, middle of the field, then the strength gets called to our left, because most offensive coordinators are going to be right-handed, and so they're going to tend to run to our left. And the reason for those, the most important ones, are teams that run a tight end tend to run to their tight end side more than away from the tight end, and teams tend to run more to the wide side of the field where they've got more space than they do into the boundary. We want our 3 technique, our best defensive linemen, set in the direction that they're going to have the tendency to run more so that he can make those plays. Most high school and youth, middle school teams are only going to have 1 true, legit stud that can play that 3 technique, take up double teams, and really be a force in that defensive line. If you've got 2 or more, that's great. Some teams are struggling just to find 1, but if we've got 1 or the best one, he's going to be at that 3 technique. In the 4-2-5 or the 4-4, where the strong end is going to be C-gap responsible, he's going to be taking on the tight end a lot. Our weak side end is going to be more of an athlete, free to run, and so we want that true defensive lineman, strong end, who's used to lining up on a tight end. With no tight end in the game, it's not as important. And again, in our 4-3 defense system, we tend to put the defensive ends outside shade in a 5 and a 9 on the tight end, and so it's not going to be as important for him to hold the point in that C gap. Don't worry too much about the defensive scheme. If you want to learn more about this 4-2-5 defense scheme, then you can go check out a video series that I've put together at 425defense.com/YouTube. The link is down below in the description to get that. So don't worry about the scheme right now. We're just going to be talking about why we're flipping. Our best defensive tackle is that 3 technique. We want him to be on the strong side, but we also want to have somebody in the B gap. We also look at where teams tend to run. One is our base run play, which is power. Now, power teams like to run to the tight end side. We'll motion this guy over, kick out the defensive end, wrap to the linebacker with the backside guard. Quarterback will reverse pivot. This is a B gap, off tackle, run play. Finish out a run fake. And that's where teams want to run the ball. We see a ton of power. We run power. So this is an important play for us to be able to stop. The double team is happening on that 3 technique. We want the big stud there. If he can beat that double team, this play becomes much less effective. If you have to double team him, it's harder to get off to the linebackers. He's going to create a wider edge because he doesn't get washed down. Another popular base run play is going to be your veer or a triple option where they're going to have a double on, again, our best defensive lineman. And this play becomes much less effective if they cannot get that double team on our 3 technique. If he can beat that double team, he's going to take away one of the key components of the triple option, which is the dive. And his job is to stop the dive on the triple option, along with the inside linebackers. They're going to read our defensive end, bring him around into pitch relationship with motion. But if that 3 technique can handle that B gap, then we're going to be in a very good situation to stop the triple option. Now let's look at a spread run play, the zone read, which this may be a situation where we would make a surface strength call, where we would say by game plan, hey, we're going to call the strength opposite the alignment of the back. We know teams do things to mess with that by flipping the back, but if it puts us in the best position, that might be something we do. And we know that zone read teams are going to be running the ball with the zone run coming away from the initial alignment of the back. So we're going to get our zone run again happening right at our best defensive lineman, who's going to be, if he can keep that combo on him, if they can't double team him, then they're going to have a very, very hard time getting up to our Mike linebacker, and that's what we want against the zone read. So this is another run play where that B gap off tackle area is critical, and we get our strong tackle, our best defensive lineman, in that position. Now that's 2 reasons why we like to flip our defensive lineman. Hurry up, no huddle, surface calls, these things can all change it. And if you happen to have guys that are all equal and can do all of these things, then great, you're in an awesome situation. But we don't tend to have that. I mentioned why we flip our defensive end because of the tight end. Without a tight end, it's not as important. With 2 tight ends, we may be taking out our weak side end and putting in a backup strong end, depending on personnel. So a lot of things to consider. This isn't, it's never just set in stone, but we try to give our guys as little to think about as we can without changing from week to week. I mentioned the video series on the 4-2-5 defense system. The link's down below here. It's a 3-video series that's going to show you the foundations of the 4-2-5 defense, as well as how we defend a spread offense and a wing T offense. Check that out at 425defense.com/YouTube. If you want to see more videos from Joe Daniel Football, then click on the subscribe button and make sure to like this video. I think the subscribe button is going to be up here. And if you want to see more videos on the 4-2-5 defense, go ahead and check these out somewhere over here.